Hello, Facebook Live. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. It is 7 a.m., lifts after 7 a.m. on the 27th of October. And I am officially live now. Welcome to Facebook. Welcome to YouTube on the replay, Facebook on the live. My notification. Let's do our sound check. Perfect. Sound is here. Good morning, everybody. A little chilly out, but it's not raining. We got a lot of rain yesterday. A lot of rain, a lot of trees down. We did not lose power here in Ellenville, even though a lot of people did lose power. We heard, and a lot of trees were down. We were okay here in our part of Ellenville, anyway. So, if you are tuning in, I am Chef Marcus Guiliano. I have a mission not to serve farmed salmon ever. I have not touched farmed salmon. I've not eaten farmed salmon. I've not served farmed salmon, whether it's been smoked salmon like lox or salmon fillet or whatever. It's been since the 90s. So over 22 years. Over 22 years, I have not touched farmed salmon. In the late 90s, I had the pleasure of sitting next to Henry Lovejoy, the founder of EcoFish, at a sustainable seafood conference, and that totally changed my view on seafood forever as a chef. Everything from shrimp to tilapia to mahi-mahi. I mean, everything. Just totally, he taught me in that 2-hour dinner. It's probably one of the most powerful dinners I've ever had in my career, because it really shaped my future of sustainable seafood, of sourcing better seafood, of being committed and dedicated to more of higher quality food. So that was a really powerful dinner, sitting next to Henry Lovejoy. Henry and his wife Lisa own a company now. They're still EcoFish, but they own a company called Henry and Lisa's Natural Seafood. You can find them in Whole Foods and all other health food stores across the country. At one point, he was doing wholesale to restaurants, and I became one of his first ever restaurant clients when I worked in Colorado, and even when I got here in New York at the Country Club, I was buying a lot of fish from him. They eventually switched over to retail from wholesale, and has made a great business and has impacted a lot of people, especially a lot of chefs throughout this time. And Henry started the company because he was fed up working for seafood vendors that were, because he came from this wholesale seafood world. He was fed up with working for seafood vendors that just didn't care about the fish they were bringing in, and knowing that the fish was going extinct, knowing that the fish was toxic or polluted, all that kind of stuff. So. Answering Jamie right now. I guess she doesn't know I'm live. So that right there was really the most powerful single event I think I've ever been to as a chef. So I've had the great pleasure of meeting many amazing seafood advocates along the way, like Alexandra Morton, Don Staniford, Bill Bryden, and a lot of these people have been actually on my YouTube channel, and we have collaborated with them, and they really appreciate what we're doing here at the restaurant and our strict dedication to serving sustainable seafood. So if you are tuning in live, drop a comment, #live. If you are, also tag somebody too. If you know somebody who eats salmon who is interested in sustainable seafood, I'm going to drop 10 reasons now of why not to eat farmed salmon ever, at all costs, ever, never eat the stuff. And as a chef, again, I have not consumed personally or served farmed salmon since the 90s. And I've gotten into many arguments with seafood vendors at seafood shows, because when they post their nonsense and put fish on a display and say that it's sustainable or organic or that their salmon's better, I actually call them out on their nonsense. And a lot of these seafood, you can walk into local seafood stores in the Hudson Valley, and they will tell you how great farm salmon is, and how farm salmon's the future, and it's saving the wild population, and that they're not feeding them hormones and antibiotics, and that they're clean diets and this and that, and they're certified organic. And folks, it is just simply not the truth. This farm salmon industry has to lie to sell their products. That's how it's always been. There's better farm salmon, but we're talking about the farm salmon I'm talking about right now is open net penned or open pen farm salmon, which comes in the ocean, which is where the majority of your farm salmon comes from. There is a system of doing an inland containment system, which very, 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 very few farms do that because it's super expensive. It's up to 7 times the cost to put an inland system in. So if you're going to spend $1 million on a farm, why would you spend $7 million on a farm, right? So it's simple economics that if you're going to do an inland farm containment system, you've got to charge a lot more for your salmon. And we're just not used to paying. A lot of us just aren't used to paying as a society more for food when we see cheaper food or better value food in the grocery stores. So it's really a tough one. And it's super tough for chefs. Like really tough for chefs and restaurant owners to spend more money when they know they can walk in the restaurant depot and look at farm salmon right there from Norway or from Scotland or from Chile for $4 a pound. it's there's no question, ifs, ands, or buts. Why would you pay $12 a pound for true wild caught coho or sockeye salmon from Alaska when you can buy the other stuff for $4 a pound, right? So that's why many restaurants that's why these and sometimes and $4 a pound is bottom of the barrel. You know, that's the value stuff. Sometimes stuff will go up to $6, $7, $8 a pound at the high end, but still, if you're going to buy king salmon, wild king salmon, wholesale in the restaurant, wild king salmon would cost me almost $15, $16, $17 a pound, $18 a pound for real king salmon from Alaska. Troll caught kings, they would cost that much money. So you can see the vast price difference. The best farm salmon to the best wild salmon would be double the price. And so you put a piece of salmon on a plate at a restaurant and you're paying $16 a pound. Let's say you're doing 8 ounces, that's $8 on the plate. Then you have your vegetables, your starch, your sauce. And restaurants like to run at a 25% food cost. So you're going to say all that stuff's going to cost you about, the fish alone is going to cost you $8. The vegetables, the starch, the sauce, anything else is probably going to add another $2. So you're at $10, maybe $10.50. You want to run a 25% food cost, so you're going to times that by 4. So now you're at $40 to $44 for that dish. It's much easier to pay $4 or $5 a pound, 8 ounces. You put $2 to $2.50 on the plate. You put $5 on the plate total. And you can then charge that by 5 or 6 times the amount, which would be $30. You could charge $30 for that, or $25 to $30 for that. You 5 to 6 times it, so you're running a food cost between 16 to 20%, which means out of that money, out of the dollar that goes into the register for the food that you're paying, only 16 cents to 20 cents actually goes into the food, right? And only that's all that goes into the food is 16 to 20 cents. The rest of the dollar goes to pay labor and bills and all those kinds of things. You have somebody like me who is buying the wild line-caught salmon at a much higher price than the $4. And I'm looking at my numbers, and I'm putting like 30 cents to the food that you're getting here. So it really disheartens me when people say, overpriced or overrated. And overrated means they just don't have the money they spend more than their budget when they write reviews. Or this place was overpriced. If they just knew my dedication, what we did in it, what we put into it, it would be a totally different story. And it's hard to tell that to everybody walking in, because they'll go on to Yelp, they'll go on to Google, they'll read reviews. Oh, this is a great 5-star place. Let me go check them out. And then they come in and sit down, and it's their first time in, and it's hard to understand my dedication and passion for the last 20 years by glancing over a menu and ordering a burger or salmon. So that's the disheartening part. All right, folks, let's jump into the 10 top reasons that you should not be consuming farmed salmon. Why to avoid farmed salmon at all costs. This came from Alexandra Morton. Alex Morton is a friend of ours. She is from British Columbia. She is a marine biologist that moved to British Columbia in the late 80s, and they started putting salmon farms out in the bays there in British Columbia. And she threw her hands up and said, "You cannot do this. You cannot put salmon farms in the migratory path of wild salmon. The salmon farms will kill off the salmon." So she went there originally and watched the orca whales. That was her original mission there. And from the late 80s to now, the orca whales have disappeared. The wild salmon have disappeared. The livelihoods of the native people there in Canada has disappeared. Their fishing livelihoods have disappeared. Bears go starving in the fall time because there's not enough wild salmon running up the streams to properly feed the bears. So it's had a massive impact from the 80s to, I mean, within 2 decades, they noticed things that were totally wrong with that. And the First Nations people, the native people of the First Nations, do not want the salmon farms. A couple years ago, they did something called Occupy the Salmon Farms, where they protested and sat on the salmon farms on the shores to protest all the salmon farms there because they know it's killing their livelihood and their ecosystem, and that it's just a terrible, terrible thing. So when a chef tells you, "Oh, I've got better farmed salmon," or "I'm serving farmed salmon," farmed salmon saving the life of a wild salmon, it's total nonsense. It's total nonsense. So Alexandra, this is from her website, and we reposted this, by the way. So there it is on our website. But bad for you, bad for the ocean. And like I said, Alexandra has been on our podcast before. She's been on our videos, on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook. So she's been a guest a few times. So we need to get her back and get some more updates of what's going on in that part of British Columbia. So number one reason, 1 through 10 here. Number 1, salmon farmers never shovel their manure. They just let it fall through the nets. Think of kitty litter box that never gets changed. Thousands of tons of feces and other wastes on the seafloor around the sites that is never removed. Now, sometimes they move the salmon farm, a few kilometers over, but what happens is all that manure just goes to the bottom of the ocean and sits there, and it totally creates a dead zone in that part of the ocean forever. It is a dead zone, just like the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. All the runoff, the agricultural runoff from the Midwest of the United States goes into the Mississippi, goes into the Delta, into the Gulf of Mexico, and creates this dead zone that grows nothing. It's so toxic, nothing can live there. So this is what happens under salmon farms. Life is dead there all of a sudden. It's just non-existent. Atlantic salmon swimming in a soup of mucus and excrement breeds pathogen mutations that enter into the ocean and the supermarkets. So we all know that pathogens from what we eat, from livestock that we eat, can go into and transform and create mutations that can make us sick, us humans. So when salmon just swim in all this mucus and feces and excrement, because they're literally sitting there, 100,000 fish at a time, 30,000 fish at a time, whatever size the nets are, they're jam-packed in there. And some fish farms will say, well, we have low density. Low density means 1 fish per bathtub instead of 2 fish per bathtub. That's the definition of low density, folks. It's like one of those free-range things that is a total scam, and it says your eggs are free-range or nest-free. Eggs are nest-free, which really means that the chicken has like 120 square inches in a cage to be considered nest-free. So they know how to manipulate definitions. So they think they're going to fool us and trick us, and they do this to a lot of people. But when you do research, you're like, oh, wow, that just doesn't make sense. Number 3, a U.S. scientist studying toxins in farmed salmon told the media one should avoid farmed salmon like the plague. and there is a link to all of this stuff here. She has cited everything on here. Number 4, farm salmon are colored pink to imitate wild salmon. Producers use Samofan to pick what color they want the fish to be. The colorant is added to the feed. Now, this is where it gets tricky, folks, because they're going to tell you that they're using anazaxanthin, which is the coloring of like krill. The natural stuff in the ocean is a super powerful anti-aging oxidant, anazaxanthin, and this stuff is this stuff is like the fountain of youth. This stuff is amazing. However, this natural antioxidant, or this antioxidant they're adding to the fish food to change the coloring of the fish, is derived from a petroleum-based version, which is not approved for human consumption. Never was designed for human consumption. It was designed specifically for the seafood industry. A petroleum-based anazaxanthin, which is not the same stuff that you're eating when you eat krill or chlorella. When you have chlorella or spirulina, that really dark pigment is this. And that dark pigment is this very, very strong antioxidant, which is a super fountain of youth for us. I mean, it is an amazing, amazing thing. It's amazing for the salmon, but farm salmon don't get that. They get a toxic version of it instead, a man-made version of it instead, a synthetic version of it instead, because that's the cheapest way to go. It's all about money here. They could never afford to buy natural anazaxanthin and put it into their feed. They could never, ever, ever afford it. It would raise the price too much. And then you'd be like, well, why don't we just buy wild salmon, right? Why don't we just buy the real deal wild salmon? So that's the story with that, the coloring. And if they tell you that it has this antioxidant in it, it's not an antioxidant. It's a synthetic from petroleum. Number 5. Norway got the European Union to allow 10 times more endosulfane in farmed salmon feed. This is a pesticide banned in many parts of the world because of it's dangerous to human health. Now, the reason they're putting this pesticide, a pesticide, into salmon feed is because it's creating the oxidative benefits, so things don't oxidize, so they don't turn rancid. Salmon food has an insane amount of fat in it. You need a lot of fat in salmon food to raise salmon. So you have to stabilize the fat, and they're stabilizing these with banned pesticides. And now here's the bad news. Fat is a great carrier for all the toxins, the PCBs and everything, stay in fat. This is why tuna has a high mercury content, because tuna is a fatty fish, and all the mercury goes into the tuna. So now they're taking all this high-fat, wild-caught fish and stabilizing it with something, and then making this high-fat fish food that is loaded with a pesticide. So this obviously goes to the salmon, and the salmon bioconcentrates, just like tuna would bioconcentrate this out in the wild. So, number 6, if farm salmon feed contains big byproducts. Pig byproducts. In fact, one of the largest producers in Canada several years ago bought their own rendering plant so they could take all the extra parts from pigs and chickens, which feathers, beaks, everything that's left over that they won't put into makeup and things like that. Everything that's left over gets rendered down into pellets for salmon. These are all byproducts of pork, of the pork industry, the chicken industry. Literally feathers, beaks, everything that's not usable gets ground down and reused and put into pellets. It's really crazy. But this is something you never walk in, and this is a common practice, folks. This is a really common practice. But you never walk into a fishmonger and be able to say to them, hey, which one of your farm salmon here doesn't have any pig parts in it? They would have no idea what you're talking about. They're like, I have organic, I have this, I have sustainable, I have this brand. And I'm like, no, which one wasn't fed rendered pig parts? Because a lot of them do it. It's a very, very common practice. Number 7. Seals, sea lions, and birds become trapped and drown in salmon farm nets. So these open pen nets that they do are nets that they drop in. They build a frame, a base, and they drop in these nets into the ocean, and they have holes in them, right, like this. So The salmon swim inside there. The holes are big enough where the salmon can't swim out, small enough where the salmon can't swim out because they're raised somewhere else first and then transferred and to these nets. But there's seals, sea lions, other things that say, oh, look, there's food in those nets. There's food in those nets. That's an easy catch. So sea lions don't know. They swim inside these nets and they get stuck. Their heads get stuck. And they sit there and they get stuck and they drowned. They're done. And it's more of a common occurrence than you actually see or know about or even heard about. So when you go to buy salmon from your fishmonger, they're saying, oh, I have this sustainable salmon, farm salmon. Ask them how many sea lions or seals were actually injured and why the farms are actually allowed to actively shoot seals and sea lions. They're actively allowed to shoot them in most parts of salmon farming industry and regions because they're a threat to the farmed salmon. All right. Number 8. Farmed salmon cannot feed the world because they use more fish than they produce. Farmed salmon eat pellets made of fish, grains, chicken, byproducts, and oils. They contribute to fishing pressure, driving the wild stocks towards extinction. So it actually takes more wild-caught fish than you're going to actually yield from the salmon. So I think the ratio is 3 to 1. 3 times the amount of caught wild protein, other fish, to make 1 pound of salmon. So how would that ever be sustainable, right? That's just, Alexandra Morton said there's no right way to do the wrong thing when it comes to farm salmon. There's just no right way to do this. They're going to tell you it's more sustainable. Chefs are going to tell you, oh, I have Faroe Island, I have Scottish salmon, I have this, I have Norwegian. It's all the same, folks. Once you're into net farming, net pen farming, open pen farming, it's all the same. Some farms might be doing it a little bit better than others. But folks, it's all the same. It's scamming. It is scamming. It's not real salmon. It's scamming. Number 9, wild salmon have gone into decline everywhere salmon farms operate. This damages coastal economies and life in other coastal oceans. This is just what I talked about the First Nations in British Columbia. They don't have their fishing livelihood anymore. When you put the fish, these salmon farms in the migratory path, all those pathogens, the lice, all the disease, all that dead zone stuff affects what's around in the fish's in the natural habitat, in the natural ecosystem there. So now you have fish, salmon that swim upstream, and don't forget they swim right past the salmon farms. They go lay their eggs. They spawn in the exact spot. Salmon are very, very smart. They have the instinct that is amazing. They can go swim 2,000 miles in the ocean, and then all of a sudden go back to the exact spot they hatched. Talk about an intelligent species. They are a keystone species. A keystone species means that so many other species rely upon farmed salmon to do their job. Everything from a tree 1,000 miles upstream is relying upon the salmon's migratorial journey, so it can swim back to that same spot. It can die, get eaten by a bear, and a bear can then have excrement that then goes and fertilizes the tree. So it's a truly, if the wild salmon population collapses, our environment's in trouble. Now, Alaska has no issues with farms with wild salmon because they have no salmon farms. You go to British Columbia, they have issues because they have salmon farms. You can cross the border and see that there's a vast difference of this, and the government knows this. The government totally knows this. All the advocates know this. The companies know this. All the salmon companies know this, but they have so much money in the game, and they make so much money from this. And they buy off government officials. It's just like the drug companies. They take somebody from their company, whatever the company is, Cook Agriculture, whatever. Then they stick them in a government place, and then to oversee this toxic, detrimental devastation that they're in charge for, that they make millions and millions and millions of dollars on, that are making us sick. So it's insane, and we need more people to speak up and educate themselves. And don't get me wrong, you can go to their websites and they will convince you They will convince your fishmonger. They will convince the average chef that their salmon is amazing and it's sustainable and it's different than everybody else's. That's their job to do that. Their job is to sell. Their job is to market. And they're very smart on how to do that. And they can throw numbers out there and make things look great and put out some scientific studies and reports to make it look like that. But the bottom line is it's not that. They're in the marketing realm, and they'll use scientific numbers to manipulate their marketing. And, I always said, like, if you put vitamin C in cigarettes, you could legally advertise 100% of your daily allowance of vitamin C, which is like something like 40 milligrams, something stupidly low, right? You could sniff an orange and literally get your amount of vitamin C. But if cigarettes put vitamin C into the cigarette, you'd see these cigarette companies saying, "Oh, cigarettes saves lives because vitamin C boosts your immune system and keeps you healthy and this and that." And they would totally spin it with one good thing in the middle of something toxic. And that's what these companies do. They extract one good thing and totally misconstrue it, manipulate it, and make it and polish it up and put it on their website, and then program chefs and program the public and then program the people that are selling it to saying, "Oh, wow, I'm eating farm salmon tonight, and the chef here just cares so much, and this is a great farm-to-table restaurant, and he's serving farm salmon because he's concerned about the wild salmon. Because we could be eating wild salmon right now, and we could be destroying the environment by eating wild salmon." See how this is all done? It's all clever marketing. So what happens is the salmon go up and spawn, as I was saying. The baby fish, the fry, come down and swim out into the ocean. They swim exactly past the salmon farms. Well, what happens when you're a baby little fish? You're developing your immune system. You're not, a fish that's a year, 2 years old. What happens when sea lice? Because every salmon farm has sea lice. Everyone does. It's just what happens. So when you see, we don't use hormones or antibiotics, no antibiotics used, they're using other things that are very detrimental, like those pesticides. They're using something called slice. Slice kills sea lice. They douse the whole farm with slice. So you'll never see any farm salmon advertise, "We don't use slice," because they have to. It's part of the game. But what happens with those baby lice? The baby fish swim past the farm and lice attach to them. They are 100% done. They never live. They cannot live. They cannot live because they're too small, and the sea lice attack them, and they're done. These fish never, ever mature. So that's the one huge factor there of how these salmon farms are killing off our true wild salmon. Now, when the big fish swim by them and they get the sea lice attached to them, what typically works in the season, in the spawning season, is once the salmon hit fresh water in the river, sea lice cannot live in fresh water, so the sea lice just naturally die off of them and die in the fresh water. But the baby salmon have the opposite journey, and they're going out to sea for the rest of their life, and they have no shot. No shot. So, number 10, Norwegian doctors warn mothers not to eat farm salmon because of the high levels of toxins in farm salmon known to be damaging to developing brains of babies. Dr. Annelies Monsen risked her career to bring this news. Toxologist Claudette Bethune was fired by Norwegian government for trying to warn the public about high cadmium levels. Since so many people eat farmed salmon, hoping it would benefit their health, it is important to check out what these women have to say. All right? So these two doctors, researchers, qualified people, whistle blew and lost their jobs, risked everything to help people eat better. And then you have the government censoring it, blocking it. You have big corporations, all these big Norwegian salmon corporations who basically own the world when it comes to farm salmon. They have censored this information. And now you go to your doctor, and your doctor says, "Oh, you need to eat more fish. Oh, you're pregnant? You really need to eat more fish because there's such great omega-3s in there and great, essential fatty acids are going to help with brain development and this and that. And in turn, you're doing something worse. You're eating something worse because your doctor just doesn't take the time to know this or research this, or because these two people have been silenced like a lot of other people are being silenced in this realm of trying to protect us. And that does not meet their agenda when this happens in the food world. It does not meet their agenda at all. So these people go away. And this is why they have to take people from the industry, from the salmon farming, from the fish farming industries, and put them in places, just like Monsanto puts, Michael Taylor in charge of the FDA. Monsanto put him there because they're protecting their special interest groups. That's how they do it. They're not true advocates. They're not true spokespeople for us. They're not. They're spokespeople for their industry and for profits. I've told this story many times. In the late 90s in Colorado, I was nominated for the Organic Board, the National Organics Board. I had people wanted to nominate me, the Colorado Agriculture Department. Really loved what I was doing. They called me the Willie Nelson of Colorado. I did all these fundraisers. They had me on their website. They really loved what I was doing and my passion. And they said, you need to take this to the next level and you need to go to the National Organic Standards Board. And so they wanted to nominate me. They nominated me. And I had so many people tell me, Marcus, and I was young back then. I was 28, 29. Like, Marcus, you will never, ever get appointed to that board. You're not in the special interest realm. You will go in and tell the truth. You will go in and truly want the best for people, for the health, the planet, and they don't want that. It's if they get that, they're not going to get their mass-produced organic chicken. Because they have to put an organic label on mass-produced chicken so Bell and Evans can play the game, right? So they can still spray the chlorine and still do all this stuff. So this is going to be better than regular chicken. It's going to be better than regular stuff. But they want to play the game at a national level. And to play the game at a national level and to scale an organic product like that, you have to totally bend the corners. So this is why a lot of local farmers say, I'm organic, but I would never pay for the organic certification because I don't believe in that certification. Because there's things that I do that I know that it should not be done organically that are allowed with the organic certification. And they kind of feel it as an insult to pay for something that's been bastardized. So that's why you will find some places that a lot of farms will say, I would never pay for that organic certification because I do it better than what they can tell me. I'm not stupid. It's my own land. Why would I surround my own land with chemicals? Why would I, I'm feeding my family from this food. Why would I do this to my own family and my own land? And why should I have to pay for the government to tell me to do something that I feel I'm doing better myself right now? So that's the top 10 reasons, folks. That is the top 10 reasons why to avoid farmed salmon. Hope you enjoy that. Share that with other chefs. Share that with other people that are interested in their health. And when you go to a restaurant, especially when you go to a farm-to-table restaurant, folks, when you go to a restaurant that says farm-to-table is supposed to mean better quality, wholesome foods, right? So the one farmed item a farm-to-table restaurant should not have, in my opinion, is farmed salmon, because that is a toxic food. It is a non-wholesome food. It is a fake food. It is called scammon. A lot of these advocates call it scammon. A lot of people call it scammon because it's not real salmon. So that is the one farm food a farm-to-table restaurant should not have. So if you go to a farm-to-table restaurant and they're serving farmed salmon, tell them they need to do the research. They need to go to my site, nofarmsalmon.com. They need to research Alexandra Morton. They need to research Don Sanford. They need to understand. They need to talk to the people that live in the communities around the salmon farms. Once you do that, once you see the videos and all the stuff, the mortality rates, that's another thing. These fish live in such toxic environments, the mortality rates are so high. Scottish salmon, which is supposed to be the purest in the world, people tout it. The way they market it, they have to market it that way. The harder they spend on marketing, you just know that they have more to overcome of the reality of what their product is, right? So farmed salmon from Scotland, and all folks, all fish that comes from Scotland is farmed. There's a very, 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 very small amount, less than 0.5%, less than a quarter of a percent of all salmon from Scotland is really wild. They've decimated their wild population. It doesn't exist in many places at all. And the only time they really catch it is after the fish swim upstream, and it's called spent fish, because once the fish enters fresh water in the mouth of the river, the fish stop eating, which is why the fish have to build this big fat reserve for that season, build a massive fat reserve, and they start swimming into the mouth of the river. They stop eating, and they start using their internal fat supplies as energy to swim up 100 miles, 200 miles, 300 miles, 2,000 miles in the case of the Yukon River to get to its destination, its journey to spawn. Well, once it starts eating its own fat, the fish is called spent fish. And in Scotland, they'll take, for 10,000 euros, they'll take you out on an excursion to fish upstream, upriver, to eat spent fish. These are the salmon that have already gone in, spawned, have done their thing, and now you're catching spent fish. And this is what, this is the type of wild salmon, the predominant type of wild salmon. And there are a couple rivers that do have some runs, that do have some, some commercial runs. But folks, twice the price of, 3 times the price, 4 times the price of wild Alaskan king salmon. Very, very expensive. It's royalty food, basically. It's not something some restaurant's going to grab. It's not something that even like you'd have to charge $100 an entree if you were getting true wild Scottish salmon, and the very few that are available. So that's not happening. So the mortality rate. Every region is known for their mortality rates, and Scotland has the highest mortality rate because the fish live in such toxic mucus, excrement, the feces, everything's in the water and the environment there. And these are out in bays, folks. These aren't sitting in like a containment system that it's just condensing. These are actually out in the bays, but they put so much fish in there that this excrement can't get away quick enough or drop quick enough. So 22, I believe it's 22 out of every 100 salmon in Scotland die because their toxic conditions are so bad in the farms. People, you go into YouTube videos and you're talking about and you'll see the locals that wake up to the worst stench ever in these bays in Scotland because the fish just die. And you have all these dead fish in the summertime in warmer water floating in these things, and just dead fish everywhere. And it smells. It smells for a week at a time because the dead fish. And when we talked to Bill Bryden a couple of years ago in Newfoundland, he said, Marcus, the rocks right now on the shore are covered with this film. So many salmon died here. He said some number like, several 100,000 salmon just went belly up in the farms here. And this is supposedly pure Canadian farm salmon, right? Natural Canadian farm salmon, cold, clean waters, current, turbulent. They like that. And he says, Marcus, hundreds of thousands of fish died here. And the rocks on the shore are covered with this oily sludge from all the dead salmon in the bays. Imagine living near that. And then you walk into a restaurant and the chef's like, oh, I got some sustainable farm salmon from Scotland. If you lived in that and you saw a chef doing that, you'd probably speak up and say something. Say, I got to tell you something, buddy. I live in that stench. I live in the reality of what you think is sustainable salmon. And this is the best way this is the single best way that you can tell if a salmon farm, what a salmon farm is about. You just talk to the local people in the community. And they post videos on YouTube. They have no problem posting videos on YouTube. They want to expose them. They want them out. New Zealand recently, or was it Australia, banned farm salmon in certain areas. Argentina, Chile, there have been places down there that are banning farm salmon in areas. The government stepping in and saying, no. And for the government to step in and do this, because these companies are going in with millions of dollars and big promises of jobs and everything. That's what they do. That's how that's how they overcome this. They come in and lobby very, very, very heavily. And when the governments say no, Washington State, they're not renewing leases on open pen farms for finfish. They're not renewing any licenses. Once the farm's license is over, not renewed. So for governments to do this, there's a problem. There's a problem. So that's it, folks. I've been on a while. 39 minutes, 40 minutes today. I'll try to break this down into a smaller video to the 10 points and maybe post it just the 10 points. Have my guy edit it for us and break that down. So that is it, folks. Everybody have an amazing day. If you're going to eat salmon, make it wild. But the bottom line is, in all of this, is there's no clean water anywhere anymore. It doesn't matter what part of the world you're in, where you're at. There's issues everywhere with our environment. There's massive issues. So proceed to eat with caution. Educate yourself. Eat the best. You can't be perfect, but you can make conscious decisions to eat better, high-quality food. And, of course, typically better, high-quality food comes at a price. The good news is you can start your own garden. You can grow things in pots. You can create a certain part of your own food supply. So that's the good news. You can learn how to forage for mushrooms. You can learn how to forage for wild foods, and supplement that in to part of your food. So thanks for tuning in, folks. Drop a comment, say hello. I appreciate the support. Jamie and I appreciate the support. It is Wednesday, and we're closed today. Tuesday, Wednesdays, we're closed. We're back on Thursday. All right, folks, have a great day. Talk to you later.